The life and sad ending of Dan Blocker. From serving his country in the Korean War to smiling through television screens all over the world, Dan Blocker certainly left his mark everywhere he went. He led a very fulfilling life in spite of his size, which is one of the main things that most people remember about him. Blocker never let his size get him down, though. Instead, he used it to his advantage everywhere he went, and even ended up making a whole career out of it. A star is born. In the dusty DeKalb, Texas, on December 10th in 1928, Mary Arizona Blocker and Aura Blocker, also known as Shaq, welcomed a healthy baby boy into the world. They proudly declared that his name would be Bobby Dan Blocker, even though his nickname would quickly become a simple Bob. The baby came out at an unimaginable weight, a massive 14 pounds. Right off the bat, Blocker made a name for himself by instantly setting a record as the largest baby born in Bowie County, Texas. The early life of Blocker. At the age of 4, Blocker's older sister Aura, who was 11 at the time, sadly lost her life. The tragedy left him as an only child to 2 grieving parents. The hits kept on coming as the Great Depression ramped up, and Blocker's family lost everything they had. Not one to give up, Blocker's father, Shaq, decided to move his family to O'Donnell, Texas. It was here that his father opened a small grocery store. At the time, Blocker and his parents had to live in the back of the store. Due to the close proximity, Blocker regularly assisted his dad at work in small ways, such as by helping customers bring groceries to their cars, sweeping the front steps, or stocking the shelves. His father would joke that because of his son's size, he was wrecking everything in the store. Blocker's size is put to good use. When Blocker started school, he weighed in at 105 pounds and stood 5 feet tall. His size afforded him opportunities to earn money much sooner than other children. For example, he worked on a grain truck by the age of 10 alongside grown men. The men didn't mind taking Blocker under their wings and even allowed him to determine the pace at which the crew worked. Blocker also helped on construction jobs and ran grain elevators. By the time he was 12 years old, Blocker was 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds, but he didn't stop there. Once high school rolled around, Blocker was standing at 6'4" and weighed 275 pounds. He also sported an enormous size 14.5 shoe. Blocker heads off to school. Blocker first attended the Texas Military Institute, where he joined football and became a linebacker. His skills on the field were rewarded with a scholarship, providing he played football while he majored in English. The following year, he took the scholarship and transferred to Alpine, Texas, to attend what was known as Sul Ross State Teachers College. Although he stayed in the sport, Blocker admitted he didn't care too much for football. Still in search of his passion, Blocker then joined in on a school play, which was called Arsenic and Old Lace. Originally, he signed on to just be a stagehand and help move some of the heavy set pieces. However, it didn't take long for Blocker to discover that he was right in his element in the theater. The newfound interest prompted him to step in and play a minimal role as Teddy Brewster in the play. In fact, it was this role that gave him the taste of the limelight and made him realize that he actually enjoyed acting. Blocker gets called to serve his country. Toward the end of 1950, Blocker was drafted and joined the Army in the midst of the Korean War. Interestingly, it took the Army a full month to get boots that fit his size 14.5 shoe. After completing basic training in Fort Polk, Louisiana, he was shipped off to Sapporo, Japan for 9 additional months of training. Blocker was finally sent to Korea in December of 1951, along with his unit Company F, 2nd Battalion, 179th Infantry Regiment, 45th Infantry Division. By the time he left on August in 1952, he was a sergeant, but his time overseas did not leave him unscathed. Blocker's unit defends the territory. After only a few months of official service, Blocker's unit was situated in a sector of the Jamestown Line, which was near Shorwan, an area that's now part of North Korea. Here, his unit endured heavy fighting on Outpost Erie. They were moved to Hill 200 in May, where 6 of his men were killed and another 21 were injured in the battle. This very battle resulted in the deaths of 132 Chinese soldiers. Blocker survives his wounds. In June, Blocker's unit was involved in several battles at various outposts, including Old Baldy, Porkchop Hill, and Erie. At the end of these battles, and until his time in Korea was over, Blocker and his men had to hold down the fort at Hill 223. It was during one of the fights that Blocker, who was the acting company first sergeant, was wounded so severely that he had to be hospitalized. In spite of this, he was honored with a Purple Heart for saving his fellow soldiers' lives during combat. Blocker also received other citations, awards, and medals, in addition to his Purple Heart. After a short time that felt like much longer, he was allowed to go home in August of 1952. Blocker heads home and makes a life. Shortly after returning home, Blocker married a woman he'd met in college. The lucky lady was a woman by the name of Dulphia Parker, who stood much shorter than Blocker, at only 5 foot 3 inches. Blocker then returned to school, studied hard, and quickly earned a master's degree in dramatic arts. He signed on to take a position teaching both English and drama at a local high school in Sonora, Texas, where he lived with his wife at the time. Later, his family would briefly move to New Mexico, where he would continue to teach. Eventually, they ended up in Los Angeles, California, where Blocker went after a doctorate degree at the famous UCLA. Throughout their moves and Blocker's career switches and educational pursuits, he and his wife would welcome 4 babies into the world. First, they had twin daughters that they named Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn. Then they had 2 sons, who they named David and Dirk. Blocker makes it big time. While innocently standing in a phone booth one day, Blocker was spotted by casting scouts, who took note of his big Texan wardrobe and overall appearance. They determined he fit right into the popular westerns that were being played on television at the time, and immediately got him work in several of these shows, including Colt 45, Gunsmoke, Maverick, and The Rifleman. Blocker played various roles in a few movies at the time as well, but he admitted that he preferred to work on television shows instead. After some time, his small roles began to grow bigger. He starred in 5 episodes of a show called The Restless Gun. Soon after, he starred in a 15-episode stint on a show called Cimarron City, where he played Tiny Budinger. Blocker gets cast in Bonanza. In 1959, the show Bonanza was brought to the table, and Blocker was quickly cast in a permanent role as one of 3 brothers in a family of ranchers who lived in Nevada. Blocker was set to play Hoss Cartwright, who was written to be an enormous fellow with a shy personality. His character often saved his little brother Joe, who was played by actor Michael Landon, after he got in some trouble. Blocker's character's name was also a suitable nickname for the actor, which helped solidify him to the role in people's minds. The name was fitting because it also served as a general nickname that was often given to large but friendly men in rural areas, such as the Rocky Mountains. The fame of Bonanza. Filming took place at Hollywood's own Paramount Studios, in addition to scenes that were filmed on location in the mountains of Northern California as well as Nevada. Bonanza was broadcast as a full-color series and quickly became one of the television shows with the highest ratings in the 1960s. In addition, Bonanza ran the second longest out of all Western shows, beat out only by one other Western show, which was Gunsmoke. Bonanza gained a fan base that stretched far beyond the United States after it went global and was shown to hundreds of millions of households in numerous countries. Co-workers would later state that Blocker was the most likable cast member on the entire show, and at one point during the series run, Blocker was viewed as the world's best-known actor. Blocker pays the price for fame. As is the case when a person rises to stardom, Blocker missed the privacy that he once had. He could no longer go anywhere without being spotted, recognized, and swarmed. In one instance, fans mobbed him at a baseball game that he went to with his sons. They demanded autographs and refused to leave him alone, so he eventually took his sons and left before the game even began. Toward the end of his life, he moved his entire family to Switzerland in search of a little peace and privacy. He once said, "Like money or health, we don't appreciate the value of privacy until we've lost it." Blocker also expressed shame at his growing bank account and excessive wealth, simply stating that, "I sold out." Having been a teacher at one point, he felt guilty that many jobs, like teachers, work much harder and have more important jobs than his, but get paid so little in comparison. Blocker even went back to his old place of employment, as he was considering getting back into teaching. However, the principal at the school where he was used to teach told him there was no way he could come back to work there. The principal simply declared, "You'll always be Hoss." Blocker's sad ending. Although Bonanza's fame would keep it on air for a full 14 seasons, Blocker would only star in 13 of them. On May 13, 1972, when Blocker was only 43 years old, he went to a hospital in Los Angeles for a simple and routine surgery on his gallbladder. He came out of surgery only to suffer 2 pulmonary embolisms, which is what happens if a blood clot becomes lodged in an artery in a lung and blocks the blood flow to part of the lung. His death was sudden and tragic. His beloved wife of 20 years, along with one of his twin daughters, sat by his bedside when it occurred. Sadly, instead of making plans for a smooth recovery at home, they had to make plans for a funeral. Remembering Dan Blocker. Following a private ceremony, Blocker was laid to rest in Woodman Cemetery, just outside of his hometown in DeKalb, Texas. And although his dad's grocery store is all boarded up, the name Blocker can still be seen, written in bold letters, and posted up right by the entrance. The O'Donnell Heritage Museum, which is located in O'Donnell, Texas, dedicates an entire room to Blocker's memory and is filled with Hoss memorabilia. In addition, a short drive away from the museum sits a modest lot that's located in Courtyard Square. The lot was eventually changed into a memorial garden that's home to a monument whose existence is in dedication to Blocker's memory. The monument is a life-size bust that was tediously perfected by sculptor Glenna Goodacre.